We'll have to start our discussions on AM Talk. My guest for the morning, actually the first, I'm hoping to have in the studio Dr. Mustafa Ahmed also. Patrick Yabuama, he is a legal practitioner but also a member of parliament for Okankwe Central, a member of the MPP as well. Thanks for joining me. It's
You're
a privilege
welcome
to have you on the show.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Let's start with the subject of, well, I don't know whether it was miscommunication or the concerns being raised by customers of various banks. I guess many of us are customers of banks. And the corrections being made by officials of government. And this has been aptly captured on the front page of the Daily Graphic that says no VAT on normal banking services. It affects data processing, legal, accounting, actuarial, consulting services, etc. And these corrections have been made in the media by various deputy ministers, not only for the finance ministry but also for the information ministry. And the deputy minister of finance, or one of them, Castle Latuforsen, he said that the levy only relates to the services that were initially not a core function of the banks. Now, if you take a look at a cross-section of the newspapers this morning, for example, on the front page of the Daily Guide, this has been captured and basically says that bank customers panic at 17.5% VAT. So it depends on which way you're looking at it and how it's been captured. What you make of, I don't know, is not only the introduction of the tax itself, but perhaps maybe the way it was communicated to the banks.
Very well. Good morning to your viewers. I think with the coming into force of the VAT law and the subsequent amendment which introduced these charges that customers are complaining about, I believe public education was very key, because Ghanaians are overtaxed, companies are overtaxed, the economy is not looking good, and if government wants to raise revenue through the introduction of this VAT regime on certain banking services, then the Bank of Ghana, the commercial banks and government should have taken the pains to educate the customer on the implications of some of these charges that they wanted to introduce. For you to wait for banks to send text messages to customers and for it to trigger this chaos in the industry makes me wonder whether we have responsible people in charge of our financial sector. It's very unfortunate, and I believe government and the Bank of Ghana has got a lot of work to do to sensitize the public and lay the issues bare and very clear, because there are some lingering doubts about the implications of this 17.5% on some services that the bank would be offering to customers.
You're a member of parliament. You were there when the thing was passed, right?
I was, please.
Okay. The concerns you raised at the beginning are still pervasive, right? If you say Ghanaians are overtaxed, what do you mean? Because I'm not only hearing it from you, I'm hearing it from a cross-section of members of parliament.
Well, there's been general tax increases in various sectors. VAT from 15.5% to 17.5%, corporate tax, tax on other items that you and I, service tax and what have you.
And other related taxes.
And other related taxes, which we pay indirectly, because most of the time, most of the taxes that we pay are indirect taxes. And that is what I mean by Ghanaians are overtaxed.
Now, if you take a relook or all the considerations thereof, perhaps the argument that government needs to broaden the tax net comes into question. Are we not making the right effort, you think, as a country?
I think so, because if we have a population of about 25 million, and we have, let's say, about 15 million people or half of the population working, and government comes out to tell us that, oh, only 4 million people are paying taxes. Then the question is, what other steps are you taking to make sure that those on tax class are being taxed? Because they form the chunk, and the informal sector is where the government has to look at. But government always goes to look at companies and people who can be taxed directly. But I believe that is not where government must be looking at. And government must take some steps like computerizing the tax system and making sure that the tax net that they talk about, it being widened, is achieved. Because if you don't computerize, a lot of people would avoid tax and you will not rake in the needed revenue. That will require you or will push you to adopt some of these tight tax measures, which are very uncomfortable to bear.
And ultimately, what do you think, as parliamentarians, you envisage will be the effect on the population overall? Because
it will lead to the fact that companies and individuals who are very smart will consult their tax experts. Because if you avoid tax, it's not an evasion of tax. They will find very innovative ways to avoid tax. For example, remittances, which were coming into the country. If I were an expatriate and my salary was coming here, or the company needed, let's say, 20 million in the country at every point in time to transact certain businesses, and Bank of Ghana has introduced these regulations, most of these people will ask their companies to pay them or put their salaries in their accounts abroad. Who loses? Now, mortgage companies are suffering because of some of these measures that the Bank of Ghana introduced. So I think government must be very smart in making sure that in as much as they want to raise revenue, they must take the necessary steps so as not to make people evade tax or avoid tax.
How can a tax that is expected to be imposed on other financial services, not direct banking transactions, well, perhaps also make people or stop people from savings? I've heard the argument over the last 24 hours or so.
You see, every business person or every customer will run away from charges. Even ATM charges, customers complain about. So everybody wants to make enough savings. So if there is an introduction of any form of charge, customers have the right to complain and would always complain about it. So I believe some of these things ought to have been made clear to the customer. And I believe some of the backlash that we are seeing is because there wasn't enough public education on this issue.
And following that, we've had government officials come to correct the subject and take some level of collateral damage, so to speak.
You see, that is the problem with this government. Some of its officials talk too much. The Bank of Ghana is the regulator. They work together with the banks. So it is their responsibility to come and talk to the Ghanaian public that these charges that we are introducing affect A, B, C, D. They are the experts. They can clear some of these issues that the customers are complaining about. But you hear the Minister of Finance and what have you coming up because they don't even understand the issues.
No, you can't say that to at least the ministers of finance. I guess they understand the issues better.
They do, but they are not explaining it better.
Right, so the communication is wrong.
Yes.
But the point is that this is a political issue, no matter what you want to think
everything in this country is politics. You see, everything in this country is politics. And that is why everybody must be interested in politics. Because when you are paying these taxes, Roland, you are going to be affected if you do or conduct any transaction, be it legal or actuarial. You are going to be charged with. So what has politics got to do with this? Everything is politics, and every individual in this country must be interested in the politics of this country. Otherwise, we all stand to be affected by any wrong decision that the politician takes.
Okay, so going forward, what then do you think needs to be done now? Because perhaps once the miscommunication has been undertaken, it means that customers or would-be customers will need to be assuaged, and they need to get the right information.
Well, I know the government or the president signed this amendment way back in December. And the implementation has taken some time. It means between January and April, government's intended revenue out of this introduction is lost. Now, you try to introduce it, there's this outcry. It means you have to suspend it and make sure that the customer understands the full import of this tax that you want to introduce.
We've seen it before. The first time VAT was introduced here in Ghana, back in the mid-90s.
96.
Okay. It was resisted by the public, of course. We had pressure groups, etc., playing critical roles. The point is that the population can also still resist if they feel that it doesn't inure to their benefits, especially once it affects their livelihood.
Sure, the right to express your opinions or hit the street with the introduction of any policy lies with the people, and they stand to be affected. So I believe civil society and pressure groups must take this charge and push for a suspension of this introduction.
Well, now, for example, if government would want to raise a lot more money, or so to speak in financial terms, revenue, it also means that government would first need to tackle head-on where the resources will be coming from, and these taxes really are prudent means of directly getting access to some increased revenue.
You see, government has not managed its finances well. That is why some of this...
What do you mean by government has not managed its finances well?
Look at the happenings in Sada, Suba, and what have you.
These are just raised every day. Are they the typical,
you see,
perhaps,
you see,
mixed expenditures?
If you look at
government?
the public procurement law and the way this government has abused the issue of sole sourcing, it will tell you, or it will expose why government is looking at other sources of financing. Because even the purchase of a newspaper, I'm using it as an example, the law requires that to sole source, you must meet, there must be a certain reason which the law has provided for. But if you go and look at the way that process has been abused, government has lost a lot of money through sole sourcing. So if you go through this process and government loses money and you are required to service your debt, which stands at, let's say, 12% of GDP, you'll be forced to go into some of these measures to look for alternative sources. And that is why we are here. Teachers are complaining, labor unions are complaining, employers are complaining. The whole country and economy is in a mess. So I have the right to talk about.
Is the economy as gloomy as many people would want to paint it, and why?
Oh, you should be telling me this. The economy is not in good shape. All respectable institutions, IMF, World Bank, and all the reputable rating institutions, as well as some government officials, have also admitted to the fact that the economy is not looking good. But they'll come up and tell us different things. The economy is not in good shape. You and I know. Look at the cedi. The cedi is now close to three cedis to the dollar. The euro is around 4 cedis. The pound is inching towards 5 cedis. So what else? Look, the cedi has depreciated not less than 18% this in the first quarter of the year. So what else must one say about the gloomy nature of the economy? All the facts and figures are there to tell you about the state of the economy.
Okay, so that's it on the subject of the no VAT on normal banking services correction that has been made by the various deputy finance ministers as we have it, and many of them have been speaking across the media, especially on the subject of whether they really have to be, well, charged on just normal banking services. And we're being told that it's going to affect data processing, legal, accounting, actuarial consulting services, etc. And the financial services, which hitherto had been exempted from VAT, have now been brought under the tax, placing Ghana among a short list of countries in the world which charge VAT on financial services. And the amendment had meant that there will be additional charges on services such as maintaining customer current account, transferring money, issuing bank draft, checkbooks, and credit cards. That's really also will be a difficulty for many people as well. Okay, just on Tuesday, the newly elected chairman of the MPP, Paul Afoko, he convened his maiden press conference, of course surrounded by his elected executives as well. Paul Afoko, we're being told, hold your fire. He tells MPP, and according to the Daily Guide, and the story on page 3 of the paper basically talks about newly elected chairman of the party cautioning or issuing a caveat on those jostling for the flag bearership slot of the MPP to tread cautiously. He said the manner in which some proactive or prospective candidates and their supporters had started pushing the agenda could negatively affect the party, and therefore appeal to all those who plan to contest for the flag bearership position of the party and their supporters to stop what he described as the unnecessary media circus and rally behind the new leadership to reconcile as well as bring unity. What do you make of the press conference? That's your party as well.
Very well. Impressive, and I believe the chairman has started on a good note, flanked by the newly elected officers, with the exception of Mr. Japan, who is recuperating from the surgery he underwent. We wish him speedy recovery, that he gets back into office to take charge of the secretariat. I think the best way for the MPP is for decisive leadership, which I see in Mr. Afoko and the newly elected executive. And I believe that focusing on 2016, the executive must be accessible to the rank and file of the party. Like he rightly said, he will remain neutral. They must come up with a comprehensive program to restructure and really put the party in a very good shape towards 2016. And I believe, and I see this in the leadership of Mr. Afoko, and I believe the party will benefit from his leadership, and victory will be ours come 2016.
There's a party that has been in government before.
Yes.
Okay. It's the biggest opposition party.
Biggest party in this country, I believe.
Is a party laying in wait to be in government? That is, if the current government or the party in government loses an election anytime, any day.
Yeah.
What's there to restructure?
Every election has or must have a new strategy or an outlook. You must look at your opponent critically and put in place measures or strategies that can outwit their game plan, which I will not discuss on your network. We have to do some assessment on the party's structure now, whether or not it is robust enough to beat the incumbent NDC. That is what I believe the chairman meant by restructuring and repositioning of the party towards victory 2016.
And he says that, well, he feels that once the leadership actually appeals passionately to his supporters, more so to the key ones, they would listen. What's that to listen? The party has always prided itself to be the most democratic among all the political parties we have in Ghana. And, well, freedom of speech is a right that is entitled to any human being. And especially in a political dispensation, that's very critical. Why should somebody be gagged?
Nobody has been gagged in the MPP. But I think what he's talking about is the fact that everybody or every party member who is sitting on the sidelines waiting for the party to win must get on board the train and work very hard, or 10 times as hard as the person used to work for the party, and ensure that he or she polices the elections. Secondly, every member of the party has the duty to ensure that the right things are done in the party, from the polling station, the constituency, the regional, to the national level, until we select the flag bearer of the party. Everybody who means well for this party must get on board and support the executive to put the party on track. That is what I believe the chairman said.
And well, he has been elected to supervise all these, and restructuring that he is proposing. Now he needs to bring supposed factions within the party onto the table and do a lot more talking. Is that the best way to go? Or the approach is to make sure that people have the type of freedoms that will enable them express themselves, and make sure that perhaps they also consolidate their foothold in whatever ideologies or perceptions or sentiments they believe they can use in moving the party towards the 2016 victory?
You see, every member of the party would have a preference on candidate or who leads the party at every point in time. But it's the way you go about it that matters. You may like Roland to be the candidate, but your campaign must sit well or sit in tandem with the ideals and the purpose of the party. For instance, if you go and talk about Mr. A negatively and Mr. A wins the primary, how am I going to convince Roland to come and join us to win the elections? Roland will ask me, are you not the same person who said A, B, C, D about Mr. A? So why do you want me to go and vote for the person? So you will have a lot of work to do, either on Mr. Roland to come on board to vote for the party. So the clarion call is for every member of the party to watch whatever he or she says, so that we will not have any negative outlook before we embark on the campaign. We must watch our steps, talk very well, be circumspect, and be focused, so that we don't give our enemy any ammunition to fight us.
I've been hearing the talk, and yesterday was also reiterated at this very press conference, that, well, perhaps the party also needs to have a lot of introspection, need to look at what really were the downfalls or the pitfalls from the last election. Going by that very argument and looking at the logic that the party went to court, and even though the court has come out with its own verdict, you look at the judgment in itself and what really the judges said, all of them sitting on that very panel. Well, perhaps the party has a justification after all, and the introspection was done at the court. What is there to do again?
You see, to the first time that a party had taken the sitting president, the Electoral Commission, to court to challenge the president's election. And if you watch carefully, there were critical issues that the court had to determine. The court was given the opportunity to even understand the whole electoral process and why the MPP felt it was cheated at the polling station. The court ruled. We accepted the verdict of the court. That's for another day. The party will go back to the drawing board to look at why those lapses occurred at the polling stations which marred the elections or which robbed us of victory. Secondly, we have other things to look at, including maybe the structure of our campaigns, our message, and a lot of things which I cannot discuss with you here. So I believe for the court, yes, it was better going to court than to send the people into the street. And I believe I'll commend my party leadership for that effort. But we have other steps to take. Whether or not we had the right agents at the polling stations, whether or not we had the right structure to monitor the elections, those are critical things that the party will be looking at going forward into 2016.
Because going forward, if you take a look at the scene right now, the front runner, perhaps not very scientific, is Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo, and that also has been well captured following the numerous supports perhaps he received when he went around before he undertook his or convened his maiden press conference, so to speak. It means that, well, the party has an individual who already has been marketed to the electorate. That doesn't need to worry his head over a lot of difficulties at all.
You see, Nana is very, very popular, but he's also worried. You
know that for a fact?
Yes, because if you're a popular candidate, you need your party to also push you. Okay? That is what the party needs. And I believe every aspirant will want a very strong party to push him to victory, so that the candidate will not feel that, hey, I'm very popular, I'm doing my best, but I'm not getting the required push from the party. You understand? So you need the candidate and the strong or robust party, which I want these executives to focus on, to push whichever candidate the party elects. Okay? And I believe it's going to be through a fair and competitive election, so that every aspirant will be given a level playing field, so that when he or she wins or loses, he will have the courage to support whoever the party elects. And that is what I believe will push us to victory. Everybody must be given the opportunity to contest, so that when a person wins or loses, he knows that, oh, I was given the fair and even playing field, I contested, I won or I lost, and the rank and file will be obliged to rally behind whoever wins the primary. And I believe that will cushion us to victory.
What the top leadership of the party is currently saying, the need for unity, etc., how does that resonate among the rank and file? I'm talking about the grassroots.
The quest for unity was shown in Tamale. Looking at the executives we elected, it tells you that people from all over the country and from varying backgrounds were elected. Unity, yes, not by word of mouth, but also your conduct. So, in as much as the rank and file is talking about unity and the executive are also talking about unity, each party person's conduct must reflect the talk for unity. You cannot come and sit here and talk about unity, go out of the studio and go and do things that will not inure to the benefit of the party. Unity must be comprehensive, must reflect our outlook, our comments, and everything that we do. And I believe unity is what will push us to victory.
There's been a talk about dialogue. In what shape should the dialogue take?
Well, you are better off jojoing than warring, or going to war, or washing your dirty linen in public. You have to discuss various issues that affect you in a civil way. When somebody feels offended or affected by a certain decision, I believe the party must sit down, discuss it, give the person a fair opportunity to discuss, than to go out there and, like we say, wash our dirty linen in public. It's not going to help anybody at all. So it's better to dialogue and to have issues settled in-house than to go out there and discuss it.
Okay, so we're taking a short break. We'll be right back. We'll be joined by Dr. Mustafa Ahmed, he's a member of parliament for Ayawaso North and here in the Greater Accra region. He will be joining me shortly. So we have been joined by Dr. Mustafa Ahmed. He's a member of parliament for Ayawaso North, okay, and a minister of state as well. And okay, so thanks for joining us this morning. And we're talking about particularly whether we call it a miscommunication or whether it is that the banks didn't get it right. About 17.5% to be charged on banking services. Now we're being told that it will not be on normal banking services.
Yeah, definitely. There has been a problem with the communication that has been issued by some of the banks, giving an impression that VAT is going to be charged on all services that the banks provide. But the idea is to categorize the services that the banks provide into two groups, which are the ones that can fall under VAT and therefore will be chargeable. VAT can be levied on such services. And then the other services, which they call the core services, that the day-to-day services that we all access from the banks, like savings, our salaries being paid through withdrawals, deposits. All these ones are not going to be subjected to any VAT levies. But specialized services, like if you're going for a loan and then you need to post a collateral, and you require that somebody should perhaps value the collateral that you're going to use to secure the loan. Normally you pay some charge for that service, and that service is subject to VAT levy. And my understanding is that some of the banks undertake to perform that duty themselves, so that it becomes part of the non-core services that the banks provide. In that instance, then it is reasonable that VAT is levied on that particular aspect, because you're going to pay to the bank anyway, so the bank now has an obligation to separate the part that is should be forwarded to the VAT Secretariat. So I think that is the point. But my general understanding also is that all these discussions are still ongoing. They have come up with a tentative list, a list of services that they believe. That is a working group, because usually what happens is that after Parliament has dealt with a particular act, bill, and is passed, then the President assents to it, it becomes law. Then there's the phase that you need to sensitize the public before you start the implementation. So we are still in that period of sensitization, and that is what has actually churned out this miscommunication. So I believe that everything will be ironed out, and then the right things will be done before the implementation starts.
Now, for customers to be perhaps informed by their own banks that these will be charged so and so forth dates, those are difficulties or difficult times for customers. Already we're being told that, well, savings in Ghana is not the best. And if we have some of these new charges, whether they are going to be introduced on non-core or core financial services offered by the banks, that gives a difficulty to those who manage the banks and to the end users, the customers.
No, I believe that the banks would take the appropriate steps to correct the misinformation that is in the public domain now, because the banks themselves are part of the working group that is putting together all the arrangements for the implementation of the law. And therefore, it is their responsibility to wait and send out the appropriate message to their customers, because it's going to affect everybody. If deposits are not supposed to be levied, if my salary is not supposed to be taxable, and then you put out the information there, it's sort of worrying. And that is the issue at stake. And therefore, the banks will have the duty to come out again and correct the impression that they have created that VAT is going to be levied on all the services they provide for clients.
And once this is corrected, then all will self-correct in itself. There's a question about, well, overtaxing of the already taxed. Do you get my phrase?
No, what I'm saying...
No, just outside the issue of the...
Yeah, these are services that, for example, if you took your... For example, if we take the consultants, if you took your property and invited...
I do understand the point you're saying. I'm saying that government has introduced so many taxes on already directly tax-paying Ghanaians.
A lot of taxes.
And so they are being overtaxed. That's the argument that's being raised. Not on the streets by serious pundits who analyze the economy each day.
The issue is that there is a call that we should broaden the tax base. We should broaden the tax base. And therefore, if it's like a tree with numerous branches, if you are one individual, like my friend and my brother, who has so many activities in several areas, so you get taxed there for this particular activity, and you get taxed here for this other activity. It does not mean that you are being overtaxed, but then the services that you are perhaps providing, or the activities that you engage in because of the preponderance of services or activities. So that will attract because each activity perhaps is subject to a certain form of tax. If you have, say, a supermarket, some of the services you provide there will be subject to a particular tax. Then if you maybe run a law office, the services there will also, so I mean that is the argument that we should be looking at, instead of thinking that because all of us agree across board that there is the need for government to broaden the tax base, so that in doing so we can spread the stress, so that the load is not focused on only one small segment of population.
Yes. Okay. And well, your comments on all that he said, he seems to find nothing wrong so far as the taxes so far that have been introduced on the so-called, what you call the overburdened taxpayer.
Well, like I earlier told you, government must find other means of or sources of taxation. A tax that is not well received should tell you or give you an indication of what the customer or the taxpayer thinks about that tax. I've told you, or I told you earlier, that the communication that went with this introduction on some vital services that the banks will be offering to the customer is what has generated this heat. So I believe the Bank of Ghana and the banks must take up the step or steps to educate their customer. I think I've spoken extensively on this thing already.
Okay. And let me pick your mind on Paul Afoko before we look at what really is happening on the labor front. Paul Afoko the new chairman of the NPP, he addressed his Maiden press conference. And from all the things he's been saying, 2016 may not be yours by the end of that very election period.
Well, I will not begrudge him for perhaps stating or putting out his wish list to Ghanaians. Indeed, that is what is expected of him as chairman of a party that aspires to, take power. I don't expect him to say anything other than what he has stated. But it's like going into a race with an opponent. You need to create that impression. You need to even, you need to exude confidence. You need to provide your supporters with that leadership confidence that, look, it is yours for the taking. And that in itself requires an enormous amount of work to translate it into reality. So saying it as he has stated it is a different thing altogether. And then actualizing what he has wished is also another matter. And therefore, that is the way I will leave it.
Yes. Well, you're a long-standing member of parliament. There are times that even prior to elections, it's been predicted that you will lose your seat. You never get to lose.
So many times.
I think each election period, each election period after 1996, each time they say you lose, you never get to lose. So perhaps you have the experience, so to speak. But what does it take, especially if the biggest opposition party says that it is going to have a proper introspection of what really transpired and how it performed in the last election, and try to reinvigorate itself for the next election?
Obviously, there is always some kind of precedent that one can, or history, that one can rely on or fall upon to address this type of situations. And perhaps they are just following what other parties have done in the past. We have had an occasion where we also took a step backwards. We did an introspection. We did a review of all the activities that we engaged in the past, and then we came up with a plan going forward. And I think it paid off. But then it does not mean that your opponent is also standing still. It's also in review. I mean, the political arena is so dynamic that when you think that you are 2-3 steps ahead of your opponent, perhaps he is also working seriously. He's also working to outpace you, and it is these issues are usually not done on need-to-know basis. If my colleague doesn't need to know my strategy, I don't have to tell him. I only need to divulge my strategy for winning an election to those who I believe will not ask to torpedo my plans.
You have become an institutional knowledge, though, institutional knowledge that somebody or people need to really get, because you seem to have so much.
I don't think.
I don't know how you do it, though.
It's a learning curve.
He has a lot of money.
It's a learning curve. Each time
he doesn't spread money around.
He has a lot of money.
I know he doesn't spread money around.
I'm telling you.
I've been around him. He doesn't spread money.
He has a lot of money.
No,
he spent it in a good way.
It's an impression. It's an impression. It's the same impression I have about him. So it's mutual. It's mutual. But I think in life, every day there's an opportunity for one to learn something that will help you improve upon the way you do things. And in doing so, you are able to achieve, a lot without the sort of effort that perhaps if you did not have that information at your disposal, the effort that you will put in making an achievement.
All right. On the front page of the Ghanaian Times, a company that is supposed to be collecting bills by itself and making sure that they are able to evolve better means of collecting their bills. Say, well, customers pay them with a lot of DAT checks, that is checks that don't mature at the banks. And we're being told 1 million Ghana cedis periodically. And we're talking about the ECG. Checks worth 1 million Ghana cedis issued by some special low tariff customers to pay electricity bills in a term area from January to date bounced as the issuers did not have enough credit in their accounts. And the acting regional account manager for Tema region, Albert Shade, who disclosed it during the launch of the automatic meter reading web service, warned that corporates will be penalized by the ECG. He said hence for bounce checks worth 2,000 Ghana cedis would attract a penalty of 10% of the value, while those worth 2,000 Ghana cedis and below would attract a penalty of 5%. And I've even been to some payment centers. You want to pay with checks and they don't take at all. I guess it's also because of some of these ones. Now, how proactive do we need to make the ECG to make sure that they really get their act right?
Thank you. The ECG has a mandate or a duty to perform. And if you come out to tell us that you've lost over 1 million Ghana cedis through the issuance of that checks for payment, then I don't think they are up to the task. If somebody issues a DAT check, it's a criminal offense. It's in our laws. So what steps have they taken, or their recoveries department taken, to take the necessary steps so that those who issued those checks are brought to book? Secondly, times or the world is changing so fast that you cannot be doing things the old way. Have they computerized their payment systems? What are they doing to ensure that people pay with cash or in denominations or transact business with them without necessarily having to issue them with those DAT checks that they are complaining about? So I believe that they have to be innovative, they have to change the way they do business, and they should be very sure of who is transacting business with them, so that we don't come out with such reports.
Now, to come out with these very reports or inferences also connotes some perhaps lack of proper supervision on the part of the ECG.
Well, for me, I think the key issue is the fact that ECG has a total, complete monopoly when it comes to distribution of electricity, and therefore all these inefficiencies are not acceptable. Perhaps one should, take cognizance of the efforts that they've been making to broaden the platform for, say, collection of their bills. I'm aware that they have perhaps put out new centers and so on where customers can go and pay their bills. But are they enough? Are the platforms sufficient? Couldn't they, make it even broader than what is currently available? Now, like my brother said, the technology platform has made it or offers numerous opportunities for service providers like ECG to make it easier for their clients or customers to pay the bills. And there should be also a standing arrangement between customer and the service provider in terms of payment by check. Because I have also tried to pay by check some time ago, and then they declined the collection because they felt that in the past they have suffered this type of difficulties where the checks are presented and then there's no cash to support the payment arrangement, and therefore they should come out with a lot more innovative ways of collecting their bills, and most importantly also apply the law where such occurrences occur.
You made mention of monopoly, etc. Are you in any way suggesting that we need to have some privatization at that very front?
Well, if generally all of us as Ghanaians, we run with the adage that the private sector is the engine of growth of the economy, I will have no issues at all if there are other parallel institutions that will provide equally good services, perhaps even better than what ECG is doing. Then we must pave the way for them. And that's why I believe that going forward, perhaps we should create the space for other institutions to come and compete. So if you and I decide that, look, we are not getting the best of service from ECG and therefore we want to go to EKG, then we should be able to do so.
I'm happy to hear a socialist MP talking about privatization of the ECG, because
I'm not talking about privatization. I'm talking about
collection of bills. Privatization of collection of bills.
No,
I'm talking about
having an alternative
choices.
Yes, that is not privatization.
Oh yes, because that means you have to break it up. Yeah.
No, we don't need to break it up. ECG can still exist as ECG, but perhaps we create a space.
A different entity.
Create a space because it happened in the north.
So that people can have choices.
When electricity was extended to the north, it was not ECG that got the mandate to do the distribution.
We do understand.
A new entity was set up,
so
which was BRA-NET, so that we have...
That is power generation.
No, power distribution.
Now
in the north is BRA-NET. They do what ECG is doing in the south of Ghana.
And Gridco is doing what?
Gridco is doing
power distribution.
No, evacuation. I'll call it evacuation, because when you generate, you need to evacuate to the distributor.
Okay. Yes, I was.
Well, I'm happy he's talking about having a different entity or another alternative to the ECG in terms of provision of power or distribution or payment of bills or what have you. The ECG has to be up and doing. People have complained. If you go to my constituency today, the lights are off.
You have light off? I don't think so.
Oh, we do.
No.
Yes.
You mean your area?
Yeah, Tesano,
okay.
Fadama, Abeka. They call it Doomso. And the bills keep increasing. If the person is not being given good services and you send a bill, definitely the person will not be happy with the service provider. So I don't want to endorse what people are doing, but they will also try to go around the shortcomings of the ECG, and I think they must provide better services to their customer.
Okay. The other aspect is about, well, perhaps how they could do better by metering that those need to be metered, because we're told that each day there's a lot of wastage. That is, people who use electricity and don't pay. Each time you get to interact with officials or management of the ECG, they tell you they're doing something about it, but clearly it is visible that nothing is being done about it.
It's not.
Well, I don't believe that nothing is
or not a lot is being done about it.
A lot is being done. A lot is being done, but we need to do a lot more to be able to get to the point where we say, look, ECG is efficient. And he's mentioned Gridco, he's mentioned VRA. So you see that there are three phases. There are three phases. The first phase is the generation. Now in generating the power, there are several factors that can also affect the generation. Then after you have generated, you need to transmit the power to the distributor, and that is the function of Gridco. They also can come up with their own challenges in transmission. Then when the distributor takes over and is also distributing, he also is confronted with several challenges that he needs to overcome. So there is work to do at each of these levels. he has enormous experience with the distribution sector, in the power sector, because he's been one of the foremost contractors in that sector.
Oh no.
So if there's blame to share, perhaps we will tailor the blame to affect some of the contractors as well.
What's been done? Since you have a lot more experience in that sector,
I read a lot about every sector. I've never been a contractor. I'm a legal practitioner. I'm sure he was just joking. And that I know government has a lot of contracts with some companies to do what I call loss reduction.
Yes.
Loss reduction. Where sure. I know, I wouldn't mention the names of the companies here because it's not good, that some have even been able to reduce some of these losses to as low as 8%. Okay, but you still realize that there are some issues that in terms of payment. For example, if the company works and they are not paid, then some of these issues will trigger in because they will also relax, and some people will take advantage of their inactivity. So I believe government must also pay those who are helping them to reduce the losses for which they are making money, and also ensure that people get the right services, and also if they want customers to pay their bills on time, they must be up and doing and provide up to what I believe in, the right services to the customer.
Standardized service.
Standardized. So that when you bring a bill, nobody will complain. Dr. Mustafa has money, he can purchase a generator and or a plant in his house or in his clinic. So he doesn't care.
I care. I care indeed. Indeed. The current effort of government is to ensure that clients or customers get the best of service. And therefore, everything is being done, including some of the things that he has mentioned. But the government has commissioned a study into the operations of ECG, GridCo, VRA Net, and VRA to find out exactly what are the challenges that confront those sectors.
6 years in government. 6 years in government, Doctor.
This commission, this report, the draft report is now available and is being validated, and then the official report will be released very soon. And the main aim, like I said, is to ensure that the losses that VRA, GridCo, and ECG suffer yearly are reduced to acceptable levels. Indeed, going forward, we're going to start implementing what we call the second compact of the Millennium Challenge Corporation, and all is geared towards improving the power sector, particularly the distribution sector. So we are bound to witness a lot of improvement in the distribution sector, in the way they even collect their bills. We're going to see a lot more engagement of
Roland, you see, the government has commissioned a study. Let me tell you, government signed a contract to build some district hospitals. This is off the topic. To date, we don't know how much government has paid for the project. The president is going to Ashanti region, Tepa District Hospital. Because of that, the president cannot cut the sword for that project. Even to appoint contractors for a facility that government has secured and is paying interest on to build district hospitals, nothing is being done about it. Government is paying a lot of money into an account in South Africa through an arrangement that Barclays Bank and Ghana and Barclays Bank Egypt entered into with the support of ABSA in South Africa through a promissory note that the government issued. To date, the Ministry of Health is not doing anything about it. So these are some of the wastage that we are talking about. We are servicing a debt, but the project hasn't started. contractors have not been appointed to go on site. The president is going to Ashanti. He cannot cut the sword for the commencement of some of these things, some of the works to commence at the district hospital. So I believe the government must be up and doing. They shouldn't wait till election time to go and cut sword for the Eurojet project that, oh, we are here to cut the sword to start a district hospital.
All the governments do it.
We should have been completed.
Your party was in government,
We should have
election year,
we signed that contract in 2008.
But the point is that it shouldn't be done.
We are in 2014. And regardless of who, government is a continuing...
should be a continuous.
It is.
It's not what we see in our part of the world.
Government signed the agreement with Eurojet.
It should continue.
Yes, President Mahama should push for the commencement of the hospital. People are dying. People are suffering in the rural areas. And I believe the president must be forceful and make sure that those companies who ought to be appointed to start the construction of those hospitals must be appointed. And Ghanaians must know how much we've paid so far for those hospitals. It's getting out of hand, I'm telling you.
I believe that perhaps he's just speaking to the other side of the coin. A lot of concern has been expressed about this matter, and I guess it has to do with procurement. And the president has on several occasions even mentioned that our procurement law needs a review because it makes business a little bit expensive for us. There's a long delay because of the procedures that you have to go through, and for each arrangement it has to fit into a particular framework within the procurement law. And therefore some of these things that he's talking about, yes, there have been delays, but other sides, they are working. Work is in progress. If you go to Bekwai, the project to construct the district hospital is far advanced, and perhaps it might not be possible in just one visit to Ashanti region for His Excellency the President to visit all the districts. But I want to promise him that in not too distant future, he will go back to Ashanti region and perhaps will be at Tepa to commission
Salaga,
to commission
and what have you.
A number of them.
Yes.
A number of
them. But there are others that are.
There's a concern he's raising, and you do indeed acknowledge.
Yes, I do indeed. I know that with one particular site, they have had the unpleasant of shifting from Accra military hospital. They went to Kumasi, and it was supposed to be at Bantama. Then they moved again. In fact, they moved to another site.
Indecision is costing us. For us to be
I don't
paying
think it's a matter of indecision.
So much into an escrow account in South Africa. We are complaining about revenues, yet we collect and we go and pay into an escrow account for a project which must end in 2016, November.
That I'll have to check on what the facts that you have.
I'm telling you, you can check.
So that'll be it for our discussions for the morning. We have had in the studio Dr. Mustafa Ahmed is also a member of Parliament for Ayawaso North. He's also a Minister of State at the Presidency. Your position is a Minister of State in charge of
Development Authority.
Development Authority. What are those?
Millennium Development Authority.
Oh, okay. You supervise them? I thought it's supposed to be an independent body. Or you work closely with them?
National Identification Authority. Savannah Accelerated Development Authority.
And then the NIA. What's happening to the NIA?
NIA is working. NIA is being encouraged to explore more opportunities that are available on the PPP platform. So they've started a program with registering the foreigners that are resident in the country.
Under the PPP.
Yeah, and that has clearly...
The difficulty with the PPP that they have to satisfy a lot of procurement conditions these days because of, I guess, the experiences we've had the last couple of years. So
very well, for every new initiative, going forward, definitely there will be a number of teething problems. But I think we've had some bit of experience with some of them. I won't say it's sufficient, but at least with what we have started for NIA in particular, it has given us an indication that it is even possible to expand it to include the general population.
We won't talk about SADA because that will be, we need another 1 hour.
SADA is
You
sad.
need 4 hours.
4 hours, eh?
Yes.
SADA is very sad.
Both good and bad, right?
A lot of good.
Very bad.
A lot of good.
Okay. We've had in the studio Patrick Yabuama. He's a lawyer, a member of the MPP, but also a member of parliament for Okankwe Central. And thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
And the man you usually won't get on your set often, Dr. Mustafa Ahmed, a long-standing member of a constituency in Accra. Constituency divided, he's still around. So he has the magic wand. Whoever wants to.
He's not contesting again. So.
Mustafa Ahmed is a member of parliament for Ayawaso North, and one of his constituents is telling me, he's behind a console, they're telling me that because they love him. It's all got to do with love, right? If they like you, they like you. If they don't like
free
you.
dental care.
So, gentlemen, thanks for joining me this morning.
You're welcome.
Great respect to you, and I wish you a very good day.
You as well.
Okay, that's been it. It's been AM Talk. Next, we have a lot more for you on the AM show. It's brought to you by Mixi Coffee.